What up peeps, welcome back to a new review video. This time we've got Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. And this movie has a lot of madness in it. First of all, I'm reviewing this movie from a simple point of view. I didn't really follow the comics much of Doctor Strange and his universe, so I'm mostly judging by what I saw in this movie and comparing it to previous Marvel movies and shows. So before we jump into it, a warning of course that this review is going to be spoiler filled, so if you haven't seen the movie yet, you know what to expect. So, as I said earlier, I didn't know much about Doctor Strange before, but he has become a top superhero for me since his fight with Thanos. That was a fantastic showdown, although it was later, if I can say, belittled by his fight with Spider-Man in No Way Home. But the main reason why I wanted to see this movie is because of the outstanding visuals it has in it. It's a whole other world in there, and when I saw those visuals in the first Doctor Strange, I kept thinking if anybody saw that movie stoned, they would have had the 2 hours of their life. And in terms of the visuals, I was not disappointed with this one, although I would say I slightly preferred the visuals from the first part, mainly because the first part used existing objects or materials and played around the images with them. For example, buildings, trees, cars, streets and all of that, and it was more realistic and it looked more like a Christopher Nolan movie because I'm a huge fan of Christopher Nolan's work and his visuals in Interstellar, Inception and Tenet. But in this new one, it looked more like a fantasy because he was creating different things that we're not familiar with. And that's why I preferred the first part when it comes to the visuals, but I still enjoyed the visuals in this one nevertheless. Now this is the third MCU movie I see that presents something new, after Black Panther and Shang-Chi of course. The latter ones introduced more culture and fighting styles as well as plot and character drive. This one however had different elements of explicitness and even horror, which is quite unusual and also exciting for a Marvel movie these days, and it kind of felt like Marvel were returning to the early days of their stronger scenes. Another aspect here as well is that I could easily notice the direction of Sam Raimi because he does absolutely great, and some scenes even brought me back as when I was watching Spider-Man 2 in terms of the plot and tone, but not for the whole movie. There were a few scenes that felt off from Raimi's style and more into Marvel's usual direction with the corny jokes and cheesy dialogue. Nevertheless, the jokes weren't all that bad as compared to the previous MCU movies. In fact, the comedy generally felt toned down and there wasn't much of it as compared or as opposed to the previous movies. Now for the story itself, I actually thought in the beginning that this would follow from Spider-Man No Way Home, or at least have some elements or references from it since the concept of the multiverse was implemented practically there within the MCU, or to even have some characters mentioned from there. But obviously this is a whole different or new story, and that's alright, but I wasn't overly invested in it and didn't really feel the danger or the seriousness of stakes they had, especially with the new character of America Chavez. I would have enjoyed it more if this story was about the consequences of what Doctor Strange did in Spider-Man No Way Home and delved more into the complexities of what would happen after he used that spell which messed with the multiverse in the first place. Not necessarily to overcomplicate things, but at least with that basis you could have easily included Scarlet Witch and all the characters that appeared in this movie and come up with a great follow-up story from there. This story just didn't feel very engaging for me. And I also wanted to mention the downgrading change of Doctor Strange and how reckless he has become since he used that spell in Spider-Man No Way Home and caused all that shit show there, especially since he was known in previous movies or since the Avengers movies as one of the wisest and most thorough thinkers among the Avengers and would always calculate his moves and decisions very carefully. From the point of view of the audience, that is definitely noticeable and fails to show the consistency in character development. But from another point, at least if that aspect itself was added in this movie, it definitely would have made for a more compelling story and even a better character development for him. It was interesting however to see Wanda Maximoff become a full-on villain in this film, instead of bringing a new villain with a different story. Obviously she was one of the top Avengers and the good guys, and now she's all the way down to the worst because of her personal struggle of having a family or being with her children. I just felt that her transition or downfall from being a good superhero to a complete evil villain wasn't explained or explored more. There was, I think, a little hint of it in her previous show, but there should have been more details into what and how she descended down like that. Also the fact that she was overly driven by being with her children even though they never existed and there was no mention of Vision at all. And in WandaVision series we didn't know what happened to White Vision after he flew away, and that's another plot hole there that wasn't explored. Again, since this movie is talking about the multiverse, It's expected to see some old or new Marvel characters, and there was actually a good surprise of characters from different universes. Captain Marvel, Captain Carter, and Mr. Fantastic, whom I did not expect to see played by John Krasinski at all. I saw a fan art before of John Krasinski as Mr. Fantastic, and I thought it was just a plain fan art, but I didn't actually know that he was given that role of Mr. Fantastic. That's why I was so surprised and excited to see him there. But that excitement was obliterated very fast, and I'll get into that shortly. Also, Charles Xavier was a great addition, and seeing them all together was fun to watch. I'm not too familiar, to be honest, with the Illuminati and what their role is, so for me this was a very new introduction, but I definitely need to know more about them and what they do. Coming back to my obliterated excitement, I just did not like how these characters were easily killed off and had a very brief fight with Scarlet Witch, especially Mr. Fantastic. He was like nothing there, and the rest were very easily brushed off, even Professor X. They were very downsized and made lesser than how powerful they actually are, and I didn't really like that part at all. And Chiwetel Ejiofor is back again as Baron Mordo, but not as the one who turned from the first part, but another variant this time. They didn't include the original Mordo again, and this new one was eventually left after his fight with Strange and forgotten just like that in the end. There were, however, a few cool and even gruesome scenes that caught me off guard, but I liked a lot. Like the fight with that giant octopus-like monster and how he was killed, and also how Scarlet Witch blew Black Bolt's head using his sound power against him. I did not expect to see that at all, and I definitely enjoyed it. Also, the zombie version of Doctor Strange and his scene in the end was good fun, because it was too horrific looking for an MCU movie. The CGI was good for the most part, especially the scenes with Sam Raimi is touching, but in general there wasn't any scene that the CGI was less than okay there really. Moving on then to the post-credit scenes, which showed us Doctor Strange teaming up with Clea, played by Charlize Theron, and that he has controlled the power of the third eye. And then the end credit scene showed a supposedly family-friendly scene in the end, which doesn't really add anything. I think this film's main problem is the lack of consistency when it comes to the tone. It was very family-friendly and even corny with its jokes, like the previous and more recent Marvel flicks, but then in other scenes it was more explicit and gory and would definitely have you scratching your head thinking about what direction is it taking. So in the end, this was definitely a strange movie.
I understood that reference.
So in the end, this film was great mostly for the visuals and action. I just didn't feel very excited or caught in by the story, especially with the character of America Chavez. But once again, to be fair, maybe because I'm not well informed about the comics and the universe of Doctor Strange and how important America Chavez's character is there. Nevertheless, she didn't really present something strong in the movie. Most of her role consisted of her running around and opening starry portals whenever she's totally freaked out. That's why I didn't think a whole movie was even needed for her. In general, I would say it was an okayish movie, and I wasn't actually bored or feeling off about it, so I would give it 6 out of 10.
You serious?
Let me guys know what you thought of it and how much would you rate it for yourself, and if there are any more points that you would like to add into this review or any ideas that you would like to share, please drop them all in the comments below, as I would very much love to read your opinions and what you have to say about this one. And until I see you all in the next video, thank you very much for watching, have a splendid day, and peace out.